happened in the early 1990s when a group of teenagers decided to spend the night at Jen's house, who lived in an old Victorian home. None of them had ever used a Ouija board before, but one of Jen's friends brought along an old, dusty board he found in his grandmother's attic. Curious, they decided to give it a try, drawn to the idea of contacting the spirit world, even though most of them were skeptical. After gathering all the necessary items, candles, quiet music, and the board, they began asking questions. At first, nothing happened, but after about 10 minutes, the planchette started moving. They asked, "Who are you?" and the board slowly spelled out the name, Charlie. One of the boys, Mike, began joking around and said, "All right, Charlie, if you're real, show us a sign." At that moment, the lights in the room flickered, and one of the candles went out. Everyone froze. "This isn't funny," Jen said, thinking someone was playing a prank. Soon after, Mike started acting strangely. He couldn't sleep and began having the same nightmare, repeatedly seeing a boy with dark, hollow eyes staring at him from the corner of his room. The boy didn't speak, but every night, he got closer and closer to Mike's bed. One evening, while his friends were visiting, Mike's behavior became unusually aggressive. His eyes appeared glassy, and his demeanor turned disturbingly hostile. He began speaking in a low, rough voice that didn't sound like his own. His friends panicked and called his parents. After taking Mike to a doctor, it was revealed that his mental state had severely deteriorated. He continued to insist that Charlie was with him, watching him, and would soon come for all of them. His condition worsened to the point that he had to be hospitalized. Jen and her friends never touched the Ouija board again, and Jen's house became a place none of them wanted to return to. Sarah and her two friends, Kate and Alyssa, were camping near a house once inhabited by an old woman named Maria. Locals claimed Maria had been a witch, and even after her death, her spirit roamed the woods. Despite warnings from others, the girls decided to use a Ouija board to contact Maria. They sat around the campfire, the forest surrounding them in eerie silence. Sarah asked, "Is anyone here who wants to talk to us?" After a few minutes, the planchette slowly moved and spelled out the name, Maria. Kate nervously smiled and asked, "Maria, are you the witch that people talk about living here?" The answer came, "Yes." Kate then asked if Maria was dangerous, and the board slowly spelled out, "Yes." Alyssa, frightened, begged them to stop, but Sarah insisted on continuing. She asked, "What do you want from us?" and the board spelled, "Blood." At that moment, everything around them fell into a deafening silence. No wind, no insects, nothing. Terrified, they ended the session and retreated to their tent. That night, Kate woke up feeling a cold breath on her neck. She turned and saw a woman with a deathly pale face and long black hair leaning over her. The woman whispered, "It's not over." Kate screamed, waking the others. They fled the tent in fear, but things only got worse over the next few days. Alyssa began dreaming of being chased by a sinister figure who repeated that she would never escape. Sarah started seeing the reflection of the woman in her mirror, but when she turned around, no one was there. Eventually, they sought help from a local medium, who told them they had awakened a very evil spirit. The medium conducted a ritual to sever the connection, but the girls still felt as though Maria was watching them from the shadows long after the event. This is the story of Thomas, who once held a Ouija board session with his friends in his apartment. They gathered in one room, lit some candles, and started asking typical questions like, "Is anyone here?" and "What is your name?" Unexpectedly, the spirit identified itself as Azazel. Thomas had never heard this name before and dismissed it as a joke. Despite his friend's warnings to stop, Thomas continued to ask questions and became cocky, challenging the spirit by saying, "If you're so powerful, prove it." The planchette quickly moved and spelled out, "You will regret it." Shortly after, strange things began happening in the apartment. Doors slammed shut on their own, lights flickered, and strange noises echoed through the walls at night, like scratching sounds. Thomas, however, remained skeptical, thinking it was all a coincidence. But things took a terrifying turn one night when he woke up feeling like something was watching him. He opened his eyes and saw a dark figure standing in the corner of his room. Its face was shadowy and distorted, with glowing red eyes. The figure moved slowly toward him and whispered in a deep, demonic voice, "You summoned me." Thomas froze in terror, unable to move until the figure vanished. The next morning, he told his friends, who convinced him to seek help. They reached out to a priest, who performed an exorcism. Afterward, things calmed down, but Thomas never shook the feeling that he had opened a gateway to something far more evil and dangerous. Emma, a young nurse, worked in an old hospital known for its paranormal activity. She and her co-workers often heard strange noises and saw shadows moving through the hallways at night. One evening, during her night shift, Emma and another nurse decided to try the Ouija board in one of the abandoned rooms. They asked if anyone wanted to speak with them. The planchette slowly moved and spelled, "Doctor." They asked, "What do you want?" The board replied, "Patience." Emma felt uneasy but continued to ask questions. The spirit claimed to be a former doctor at the hospital who helped his patients by ending their suffering. Shortly after, the lights began flickering, and one of them went out completely. Emma tried to end the session, but the board kept moving on its own, spelling out, "They are here." Suddenly, the door to the room slammed shut, and they heard muffled voices and whispers coming from the walls. Following this incident, Emma quit her job and never returned to the hospital. She heard that other staff members had also experienced strange occurrences, but no one could explain what was really happening in that place. According to her, the spirits of the patients and the doctor still roamed the corridors, seeking someone to help them find peace. In the early 2000s, a young man named Alex moved into a new apartment in a large city. The apartment was in an old building that had a long and mysterious history. From the moment Alex moved in, he felt something strange and unexplainable: cold, odd noises, and the constant feeling that he wasn't alone. At first, he brushed it off, thinking it was just his imagination. The old building probably had its quirks, and the noises could have been from the neighbors. But things started to get really strange when Alex found an old wooden Ouija board hidden in one of the apartment's closets. The board was well preserved but looked ancient, with hand-carved symbols on it. He decided to leave it where he found it and not touch it, but the odd occurrences in the apartment became more frequent. Every night, Alex felt as if something was watching him, even when he was alone. Doors would slam shut by themselves, books and keys would move without explanation, and at night, he would hear faint whispers coming from the corners of the rooms. Several times, he woke up in the middle of the night, feeling like someone was standing by his bed. One day, curious and frustrated by the unexplainable events, Alex invited two of his friends to try the Ouija board with him. They gathered that evening, lit some candles, and placed the board on the coffee table in the living room. The atmosphere was heavy and tense, but none of them wanted to admit how scared they were. They asked, "Is anyone here with us?" At first, the planchette didn't move. His friends started laughing nervously, thinking nothing would happen. But after about a minute, the planchette slowly started to move. It spelled out the word "yes." Everyone froze. Alex asked, "Who are you?" The answer was short and terrifying: "Demon." His friends immediately wanted to stop, but Alex insisted on continuing. He asked, "What do you want from me?" The planchette moved slowly across the board and spelled out, "Your soul." Everyone was paralyzed with fear. One of the boys, Chris, stood up and said they had to stop this, but the planchette kept moving, spelling, "Stay." At that moment, the lights in the apartment began flickering, and everyone felt an intense cold fill the room. One of the girls, Lily, who was more sensitive to such things, suddenly screamed and collapsed to the floor, seized by a fit of terror. She claimed to have seen something in the mirror, something like a dark figure with glowing red eyes standing right behind Alex. Everyone fled the apartment in terror. Alex, left alone, quickly closed the board with the word "goodbye," hoping that would end the session. But this was just the beginning of the horror. Over the following weeks, things in the apartment worsened dramatically. Alex couldn't sleep, waking every night with the same feeling that something was watching him from the shadows. He heard strange, incomprehensible sounds and felt a crushing weight on his chest as if something was trying to suffocate him. The most terrifying event occurred one evening when he was sitting on the couch watching TV. The bedroom door opened by itself, and he saw the silhouette of a tall, dark figure standing in the doorway. Alex froze in fear, unable to move. The figure slowly approached him, and he felt an overwhelming cold. When it was only a foot away, it suddenly vanished, as if it had never been there. Alex decided he couldn't stay in the apartment any longer and moved in with a friend, leaving all his belongings behind, including the Ouija board. He sought help from a medium who told him that he had summoned a demon during the Ouija session and that the spirit was still attached to him. The medium performed a ritual to break the connection but warned Alex that some things, once summoned, cannot be fully banished. Since then, Alex never touched a Ouija board again and vowed never to return to the third-floor apartment. He still experiences strange sensations occasionally, as if something is watching him, and lives with the thought that the entity might still be nearby.